Hello. Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast that fulfills a very flawed childhood ambition of mine to be a radio DJ. And I already know some of you are suggesting that, yes, you indeed have a face for radio, Dave. But if you think that, you're very cruel and it's very unkind. But it does fulfill that dream for me. I'm Dave Jenkins, CEO and founder of Wave. And today I'm joined by my guest, Ryan Bridgman, a man who absolutely does not have a face for radio. He's a beautiful man. Hello, Ryan. Are you there?
Hello, David. That's very polite of you. It's also factually incorrect, but I do very much appreciate the sentiment. So yeah, delighted to be on the podcast today.
You're tough. You're too tough on yourself. You're too tough on yourself. I stand by it. You're a beautiful man. So Ryan, how you doing? You okay?
Very good. Yeah, really good. Thank you for asking.
You are a stalwart of the industry. Previously of Monster. I don't know. Would you describe it the heyday of Monster?
I think, I mean, all of
yes,
days.
Just say yes.
Yes, basically.
Yes,
yeah, I was there at the start, and then through lots of different periods of transition. So it was certainly a wild ride.
I was thinking, whatever anyone may think of Monster these days, that's not the topic of this podcast. However, Monster definitely wins the award, I think, for best job board TV adverts.
Do you remember those "Don't Listen to the Voices" adverts back in the day? Yeah, they were brilliant. That's actually one of the things that interested me in the company in the first place. I think those ads had come out when I was considering where to work, and I thought, that sounds like a really cool place to work.
Was that the two that stick out are the tiger one?
Yeah,
you're a tiger. Then anyone
in the mirror. I'm assuming we still do that every morning, right? Before we go into the office. Well, actually, just before this podcast, I was there actually in my mirror screaming at it. So me too. Exactly. So hopefully it comes across all the energy.
It worked. So there was that one. And apologies to listeners of yours. This is not a podcast about retro job adverts. TV adverts.
It isn't. I've got the briefing all wrong then.
but while we're on that, I also liked the one where they were playing football, and there was the intern, and the intern was trying to make the impression, and I think that might have been the "Don't Listen to the Voices" campaign, where he went and took out the CEO, just smacked him.
Yeah, I think didn't Boris Johnson try and reenact that? I think a decade or so later. I thought, hang on a minute, this could be a good viral marketing campaign for Monster if they capitalize on the moment. So
yes, yeah,
happy days.
I think he must have seen that. And reenacted it. I don't know.
He'd been in the mirror. Right, and then I think he'd gone onto the football field. That's it. That just shows the campaign worked, right?
It worked.
It worked. It was effective.
And anyone that is listening or watching that has CV access to Monster, you should now right away go and do a search on the database to see if you can find Boris Johnson's CV on there.
Exactly. Well, he is looking for a job.
Exactly.
So you'll find him. Yeah.
And I guess just to balance that out, I did like CV Library's billboard campaign with when Rishi Sunak lost, saying you're looking for a job. So just giving all the job boards a little bit of balance. Anyway, let's that's the longest intro ever.
Yeah.
What are you doing now, Ryan? You're not a Monster anymore.
I am not, no. So I like to job hop every 13 years or so, typical fickle employee. So I joined Jobrapido in January 2019, initially to work on scaling out the UK and the Irish businesses, and I currently run the UK Ireland region, North America, and Benelux as well. So obviously have a much bigger remit now, and it's been It's been really good fun. Overseen a lot of growth, and it's been great to be part of that journey. I must admit, because I joined, like I said, in January 2019, and I'm sure everyone's aware that the pandemic hit, and when you're kind of a leader in an organization and a global pandemic hits, avidly consulting the manual, like what to do if you're in recruitment and a global pandemic hit and it's missing, right? Well, where's the pages? Where's the chapter on this? So that forced us, and I'm sure pretty much every recruitment business to to pivot and really kind of think about what you're going to do and change direction. We did that as an organization, and we've thankfully managed to be really successful in that. So yeah, that's what I've been doing last 3 and a bit years at Jobrapido. Really enjoying it, and being part of a really big growth story.
That sounds, yeah. I mean, that manual, we all look for it, right? That was,
exactly. Yeah. Where is this? Yeah.
Didn't find that in any of the documentation anywhere. I think maybe a few companies may have something like that now, but
yeah.
Not at the time. So when I first started 100 million years ago with job boards, you would buy a listing on a job board and it would cost you anywhere from a few quid to £250, whatever it was. You got your ad, you got your credit, you put it on a job board, then you sat back and you waited. And sometimes you would get 500 responses and sometimes you would get nothing, depending on what you did. Jobrapido is part of a bunch of businesses that don't quite work like that anymore. And we keep hearing about programmatic, we keep hearing about performance, we keep hearing about AI, we keep hearing about machine learning, CPA, CPCs, lots of different words that keep coming out. And a lot of people still don't actually understand how it works. So I think what I want to try and just cover with this podcast is trying to actually get an understanding of that world and what's going on, how it works, and how it could possibly benefit some recruitment businesses. So let's try and unpick some of this, Ryan, if we can.
Yeah.
What is it? And firstly, let's start with, what's the difference between programmatic and performance? Because both seem to be used at the same time, and interchangeable. What's the difference? Let's start with that.
Yeah. So So here's the hot potato question. Then you've given me quite early in the podcast. I would say, programmatic itself is one of the that term is one of the most often misused phrases in marketing. Right? Programmatic isn't a product, right? It's a concept. Okay. It actually literally comes from two words. Program and automatic together, right? And essentially what programmatic is the use of data to ensure that the right person receives the right content at the right time on the right platform, and actually for the right price. Right now, that doesn't have to necessarily mean the cheapest price. It means the most appropriate price to achieve the outcome that you desire as the advertiser. And the one thing that's very specific to programmatic is all of this use of data, right, is automated. It's not done by humans, it's done by machines, by software, right? With the result being that you can, in theory, scale much quicker. But also one of the benefits for both the advertiser and the recipient of the marketing message is relevance, and relevance is critical, right? Relevance is fundamental to having a good experience and wanting to engage with content, and it's actually fundamental from an advertiser to receive responses that are relevant to them, right? So I'm looking to hire X number of people who do Y, right? And I should receive applications for that category of person that I could bring into my organization. So that actually is what programmatic is, right? It is that concept of the automation of use of data to effectively provide relevance. Now, performance, pay for performance, is simply the commercial model by which you leverage that experience, right? So that might be that, a cost per click or a cost per apply or, a cost per hire or whatever it might be. and they're not mutually exclusive. Programmatic tends to be charged on an outcome basis, either in recruitment, either on a cost per click or a cost per apply. In consumer marketing, it's typically per 1,000 banner impressions, because it tends to be more of a display format. But hopefully that answers your question, right? Programmatic, simply the automation of providing relevant content to both the user and the advertiser, and the performance element is simply the commercial model by which you leverage that and you charge for it.
Okay. So with the programmatic side, job board like Monster, CV Library, whoever it is, those guys are doing that, you would think, already, right? In terms of when a candidate goes on to a job board and puts in a search, whether or not it's jobs by email or a live search on the site, they are putting in their details and they expect to get relevant responses back. So somewhere there is a machine that is looking at what that candidate is looking for and matching that with the jobs that they have on the site, and vice versa, in terms of a client puts a job on a job board and it will then be sent to relevant candidates. And the point of matching those two is programmatic.
Well, yeah. So this is where the grey area is. Yes, in theory, but I mentioned before that it was the automation of the use of data. Okay, and the data is really, really important. Okay, so you have what we call rich data, which is basically where I'm building up a profile of you, Dave, which is based on your engagements either across the whole of the internet or a specific part of the internet. So a specific part of the internet might be a recruitment platform, for example, right? And this is quite important when we look at recruitment, because what typically do you see as part of the registration process of being a candidate is you're asked to upload a CV, for example, right? And a CV is a great example of what we would call static data, right? So it's basic data says this is who I am at a specific moment of time. And actually, particularly when we live in a world where a lot of the jobs that will be recruited for in the very near future don't exist today. Limiting yourself to a static snapshot of who you are as an individual kind of doesn't give an accurate picture of who you are, right? So actually, when you're talking about outcome-based data, which is right, what do you then search for? How do you engage with certain content? What is this person actually interested in? And I know everyone always gives Amazon as a good example. Amazon's super easy to use and all that, but one thing Amazon does really well is it builds up a very rich data profile of you, the user, right? What did this person watch on Amazon Prime? What did they buy last week? When did they buy it, etc.? And it targets you with relevant content that actually provides a good experience. So going back to a recruitment context, if you're targeted with relevant content and that relevant content is based on what you're actually interested in, your engagements, what we call intent data, then that is a really good outcome for you, because you're likely to be engaged as a user, and that is very much programmatic technology at work, because it's the use of data to provide content that is is relevant. Likewise, when it comes to the advertiser, and I think this is where a lot of people view the concept of programmatic advertising is actually getting results, optimizing results for the advertiser based on conversions, right? But the conversions only happen because you've been able to target people accurately with content that they're likely to engage with. And I think
a conversion is an application.
Well, it's whatever you want it to be, because it actually, in some instances, it might be it's often an application. Don't get me wrong, very few recruiters just say I don't care if they apply, but actually sometimes it can be just to kind of get a message across, or what they call a hand raise, right? Which is, I don't want a full application, I just want to take an email address, because it might be one of these volume recruiters, like some of the delivery companies, for example, that just want to market people to have in their database to create open day awareness, etc. So that's important. And I think the relevance, the reason I say relevance is so fundamental to that programmatic experience is, if you think about this, and I have seen some of your podcasts, and I know you've discussed before, like what are some of the challenges in the recruitment process. I think there has always fundamentally been a paradox between the candidate and the recruiter. And the reason I say that is, if you think about it as a candidate, what do you want, right? You want to receive content that is relevant to you, right? That you feel engaged with and is interesting to you. And in the volumes you want. You don't want too much, but you want enough, right? That tends to be what people want, right? They don't really expand with stuff, but I want, relevant content served to me. And then if you put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter, they actually want a similar thing, right? I want candidates to apply for my vacancies that are relevant, right? That meet the requirements I have and in the volumes I need, right? The challenge is, though, in the market we're in currently, and have been for quite some time, where there is a big discrepancy between the numbers of available candidates and the numbers of desired candidates. Someone has to make a decision about, well, do we loosen the targeting and give someone a bad experience or not? And that decision often is made favouring the employer. And why is that? Because it's the employer who's paying generally for the product, right? It's not the candidate that's paying, to go on a recruitment platform. It tends to be the employer. So what you often see is that level of targeting, shall we say, relaxed somewhat, and a more kind of volume and mass visibility products used, which kind of go against the grain of that targeting in the first place. So, I always find that's an interesting challenge that's quite specific to the recruitment market, that you actually get to a situation where you are, organizations are able to target very specifically groups of individuals who are relevant to their businesses. However, because they're in such short demand, there's actually can be, if you're not very careful, diminishing returns if you haven't got what we call feedback loops and all these kind of things in place to let the advertisers know how their recruitment campaigns are converting into those outcomes they want, which are replies and all these kind of things.
Gotcha. So performance-wise, I think that's programmatic. Performance-wise, let's just talk a little bit about how much this costs and how that works. Because again, most recruiters are used to a duration-based traditional job board advert where you pay £1,000 and you get 10 adverts, and each one of them gets the same amount of coverage, and you either get a lot of response or you don't. And that's how a lot of certainly recruitment consultancies and agencies still operate in that market. When you start talking about performance, the question always comes back round to, well, how much does it cost? How does it work? And how do I get most kind of bang for my buck? So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of, they want to come away from a traditional job board and they want to look at this programmatic concept. Sounds amazing. It sounds great, because it means that we can target this niche audience that we're looking for, or this massive audience, and try and sort of get a big response. How do those costs start to work? Because we hear about cost per application, we hear about cost per click, we hear about bids, cost per hire. I don't know. How do we start explaining costs to a traditional recruiter that's used to 10 adverts for £1,000?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, here's the thing. So the 10 adverts for £1,000, and keeping on topic, I know there's been a lot of noise recently in terms of the price increases, specifically the job board market.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean it. I've heard a rumor, right? But you know what? The way I'd look at that in this sort of market is, I would be suspicious if recruitment platforms were not increasing prices, because I know how much it costs to acquire candidates into your into your ecosystems anyway, given the scarcity of them. So unless they have discovered some some witchcraft that no one else is aware of, one has to assume they're paying more to keep their funnel of talent coming into their platforms, and they have to pass those costs on to the advertiser. So that's the preface to basically saying, when it comes to what it costs basically what the market rate is and what the market determines, and there's supply and demand that factors that in. Okay, so just to clarify the point, yes, programmatic as a concept provides relevance through that automation of data to target the right people, but it also is used to target the right outcomes, right? So across a multitude of different advertisers, a programmatic platform will optimize the responses. It will understand which platforms are maybe converting into desired outcomes more efficiently than others, and will prioritize where that content is delivered accordingly, right? So that in itself will help to determine what the price is, i.e. in the market. If you're looking for a certain category of candidates, what are the associated costs, of bringing them into the recruitment platforms, but also what are other people bidding for them, assuming they are going to be in short supply, right? The other thing that you have to factor in is also, if you're looking at, for example, a cost per application, very common, right? What's really important isn't necessarily what the cost per click is, but actually how those clicks convert into those outcomes that you desire, which is the application. I'll give you a good example, right? You might have a cost per click of hypothetically £10, right? And if like 1 in 2 of those converts into an application, you've got a cost per apply of 20 quid, right? Or you might have a cost per click of, a low one of 10 pence or so, and only 1 in 10,000 converts because it's just a really tough market, or you're not paying a high enough bid to get the traffic that's likely to convert more effectively. So to your point, the market will dictate what the most appropriate cost is, and when you're working with with partners working in the pay for performance space, the programmatic space, they'll normally be able to advise what similar campaigns are having, and then what you do is I won't say trial and error, but you tend to run a campaign on maybe with a slow introduction to see how it works, how it converts, and start to add more assets, etc. So a client understands exactly A, what it's likely to convert, but B, if the pricing mechanism is accurate. The other danger you can have in performance marketing, if you haven't got those feedback loops in place, or you haven't thought it through correctly, is actually if you pay too high a price, right? So you're completely outbidding the rest of the market. In a industry where we currently have a significant shortage of talent, as we know that, if you end up basically doing that, so you're mopping up all of the clicks, whether or not those are the easy ones to convert and then the harder ones to convert and then the really difficult ones to convert, you've got to bear in mind that actually you might be in a situation where your ROI decreases because those clicks are not going to convert into applies at the same rate as the as the first clicks you started to target where. So I would always say with programmatic, starting slowly and ramping up is really important. Starting at a price point that is sensible, in line with what other similar campaigns are doing, and also having feedback loops is super important. Feeding back to either the advertiser or if you're using a third-party tool, they will have feedback loops in place to understand exactly how your content is converting.
So what is a feedback loop?
Feedback loop is basically a way of telling the publisher which of the assets are converting into desired outcomes.
What's an asset? Come on, Ryan. Let's talk. What's an asset? An asset
might be an email versus a classified job listing versus a branded display advert versus whatever it might be. Which of these assets are converting into the outcome you desire, and which ones aren't, right? So you can use more of the ones that do convert and less of the ones that don't. And the programmatic element is this is happening in real time automatically, right? So that might be, if we're just working directly with our advertiser, them just giving you that feedback, right? If you're working with a third party programmatic tech stack, and there are quite a few out there, they will actually have that, they'll be able to track that and automate the distribution of content based on that. But those feedback loops are fundamental to programmatic advertising. So if we talk about, why programmatic is effective, where it can be effective, it can be super effective because relevance is, I would say, unparalleled. Yeah. But on the obverse, if you aren't able to provide feedback, effective feedback, though that communication isn't in place, and actually the quality of the data, therefore, isn't able to be optimized effectively, it doesn't work as well, because you're not providing feedback to the publishers, and they might continue just to use internal assets that don't convert as effectively. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
I'm gonna try and bring some relevance back to this, okay, in terms of if I'm a recruiter, because some of that I got lost with as we started going through it. So what I am getting from this is that the way that performance marketing works is in effect like an auction. So you have you bid for a certain type of role or a job that you're advertising for, and based on the number of people that they can target or find within that industry is ultimately how much you pay, and the market dictates in comparison to how much it costs to get an advert in front of that brain surgeon, and what everybody else is prepared to pay for that. So we have it's different from your £1,000 set price for your 10 ads or 100 ads. I can't remember what I said now, because you could advertise.
Yeah, the deal just got bigger. I think it was 10 ads before. Yeah.
You could advertise for a brain surgeon, which let's just make the assumption that they're in very short supply, and then you advertise for a role. I'm not sure any role is in plentiful supply at the minute, but let's just pretend there is a role that is in plentiful supply. The same amount of marketing power goes against both of those types of roles. Whereas performance-based, it is a case of you may need to spend less for the plentiful supply of candidates and bid more to reach your role that's only 10 people in the country can do that. That's right.
That is mostly right. Yeah, you're talking about basically an efficient market which determines the price for specific categories, and actually that's one of the big differentiators compared to, say, a job board market where you tend to pay the same price for a job listing. The other thing I would say though is a lot of those and I include Jobrapido in that. A lot of the proponents of programmatic advertising actually have kind of in-house campaign teams that will work with individual advertisers to optimize their campaigns effectively. So it's not just the market that decides things. It could be, maybe if we worked on removing some of the stages in the application process, maybe if we worked on changing the some of the content of the advert, the title slightly, whatever it might be, that might resonate better, and actually those clicks would convert more readily into applies, or actually the impressions, i.e. the views on the advert, might convert more readily into clicks. And to be honest, you've run an agency forever, exactly where I'm coming from, things like salaries and all these kinds of
we're back into the quality of the ad,
exactly
and that kind of stuff. That's cool. And then the other point around increasing bids may actually mean a worse result. Is the only way I can kind of really get my head around that is you have a finite amount of candidates for that type of role. The well will run dry. You can't magic up more water in there, so it doesn't matter how big your bucket is. You're still going to only get the same amount of water out that well. So actually paying more isn't necessarily going to just magic up more candidates. So you need to try and find the right level of investment
Well, I think you
for
need,
those candidates, right?
Yeah, I think what you need is a feedback loop, as we discussed before, to give you feedback in terms of how your clicks are converting into outcomes that matter to you. Because you're exactly right. A lot of people have got out. Historically, I've seen this across lots of programmatic platforms, and actually, programmatic platforms have advised them pay the highest, or sorry, the pay for performance platforms advise them pay the highest CPC. You'll outbid everyone else. That's great. You'll get those clicks, but the law of diminishing returns applies when fewer and fewer of those clicks convert into applies or whatever it is you're after, because they can, and I use that passive phrase, but they're more and more passive and less likely to change jobs as you've exhausted the initial supply of easier to convert candidates. So that depends. If that's what you want, then that's what you want. And some recruiters understand that, because the priority is absolutely getting every single candidate possible. We saw that a lot with the delivery companies, for example. Listen, I need to get everyone I can. This is of fundamental importance. But I think if your metrics are based on a set CPA goal, cost per apply goal, you've got to understand sometimes that, when you exhaust a supply, and the tap now is the water's running, it's not gushing out like it was before, then, the conversions may go down. And that's why it's so important to have that feedback loop in place, so you can understand if that's actually what you want to do, and maybe you can redistribute those funds elsewhere.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've exhausted that as best we can for now.
Well,
I'm exhausted. Yeah. Now, is this, and I've seen that more and more of your traditional job boards are starting to offer this model, and I think it kind of makes sense commercially eventually that if a job board with 100 the £1,000 for the 100 listings, 10 listings, whatever it was, they're having to spend more in order to attract the brain surgeon, but their income is only a fixed price. That's not going to start giving the advertiser the best possible outcome, or the best possible response. And we all know how quick we all are to jump on the fact that job boards don't return us a good response if an advert doesn't give you who you want straight away. So this is how the market is going, right? We are seeing the slow decline of the traditional £250 for one advert, aren't we? And we're going to have to get our heads around this, whether we like it or not.
Well, I mean, it's a concept that's known as post and pray in the pay for performance world. I mean, what I'm going to caveat before I respond to that is that regardless of the technology, right? If you're really good as a platform, or as a recruiter, or as an agency, or whatever it is, then you're really good and you get great results anyway, right? So I think we've, and I'm sure that's not what you were alluding to, but we've got to be very careful about calling either the death of anything, or that better than
definitely not
else.
the death of exactly the number of time we've gone through death of the job board, let's leave that. But
exactly.
The evolution.
In some cases they don't need to, because they're really good at what they do, and it doesn't matter what their in-house technology, closed walls, what we call it, that works perfectly well, and because their clients are getting good results. So I think the dangers always say programmatic is better because the tech is better. No, what programmatic does is it provides relevance, all right, which is extremely hard to replicate through other means, right? Not impossible, but extremely hard to replicate. But in return for that, you need to have those feedback loops in place. So it's desirable you have those feedback loops. Otherwise, you don't know what's relevant. The publisher doesn't know what's relevant. And here's the thing, right? A lot of people aren't capable of doing that. A lot of organizations are not set up to do that. They don't have the technology to do that. They don't have the time to do that. So, I'm someone who works very closely in and around performance marketing and programmatic, and I absolutely believe it is, one of the parts of the future of recruitment, and actually one of the mainstays of today. But not everyone can avail of it, and not everyone is ready to do that. And that's important to acknowledge, because I do often get annoyed when I see, particularly on some of the social media, people saying if you're not programmatic, then you're not doing it properly. As if to assume the intellectual horsepower of the recruiter isn't there. That's not the case whatsoever, right? It is one channel, and it's not a channel for everyone. And for the ones it is a channel for, it's highly effective, but that communication cascades in place. So what do I think when it comes to the job boards? I think, yes, absolutely, we are seeing them work more and more on a performance outcome, and that's quite obvious, right? Yes, we are in a situation where is almost certainly a global recession on the way. It's a slightly strange one, though, because it's a recession with what appears to be at the moment pretty much full employment. But actually, organizations will be stretched with the finances, so outcomes matter, right? Getting return on investment matters. And I think that's one way of giving people an outcome, right? Well, you're going to charge and cost per click or whatever. Now, the thing is, though, in my experience of recruitment, and whilst I might look young, I am very much in the veteran category. You took a while to smile there, but I knew that was a bit of sympathy. I'm very much in the veteran category. Never in my time have I seen anyone hire a click. Yeah, that has never happened. So I think even though job boards will work more on a cost per click basis, ultimately the outcome that matters to the employers is likely to be, applies or actually higher. So where I see the evolution from the job boards going to cost per click, yes, that's to align themselves with actually how the performance marketing platforms tend to charge, but also to enable them to work closely with some of the tech stacks that optimize programmatically as well. I think that's one of the things they'll do. But I also see the evolution moving more towards understanding what converts further down the funnel and going towards the cost per to higher metric as well, as more and more people can start to track that all the way through. I do see that is an evolution that will happen certainly in my lifetime, because the quantitative and qualitative data is getting much better, or the availability of that is getting much better in some instances, and that being aligned to the data that advertisers hold, I think tells us a little bit about where this might go, which actually is what we see to a certain degree in the consumer segment as well, where you can track all the way through to even post buy. Say someone's bought a car through programmatic, actually you can tell if that person then comes back and buys another car 3 years later and does the servicing and all that. So I do think more and more relevance will become part of that process as we get more data on individual candidates and what they want to do.
And ultimately, as you've just alluded to, it comes down to the person in the role. That's what everyone really wants. And
exactly,
what happens prior to that sometimes is of interest, but the real end result is that person.
Exactly, and there are many ways to do that.
We've flown through that. We've and hopefully people watching, listening have stuck with us. I hope that you have. But let's wind this up now with something a bit more light-hearted.
Okay.
There's a slight curveball here, Ryan. But those that don't know, they should know that you happen to be a watch expert. You are a watch guru, right? You are a lover of watches and all things.
I like watches, I think would be a way to say it. I think guru and expert, I appreciate
in my just take it.
Okay, I'll take
and swear it. So what are your favorite watch brands or models at the moment?
At the moment.
Yeah. These things can change. It's fashionable, right? So what are you what are you excited by at the minute?
What am I excited by at the minute? Good question. So I think I like brands where there's a lot of artisanal craftsmanship involved. So some of the Japanese brands, particularly Grand Seiko, So they are basically the flagship range of the, I'm sure, very well-known Seiko brand. And they compete very squarely with the, the big luxury Swiss brands, but really focusing on craftsmanship, artisanal dial work, etc. Certainly not on their brand. I think people know Seiko is a good quality brand, but maybe not a luxury brand. That has been a challenge for them. But I really like the work they do, and I still think, even though the price points have shot up quite a lot, they represent really good value for what they are. And I think from the traditional Swiss brands, I'm a big fan of what IWC are doing. So they are a brand well known for their historical pilot watches. They have the distinction, somewhat dubious, I'd say, of supplying both the Allies and the Germans in World War II. So that's Swiss neutrality for you as well. But actually, they've recently revisited their heritage and brought out some more modernized versions of a lot of their heritage watches. I mean, I'll caveat all of this by saying that sadly, with mortgages, bills to pay, and children, my ability to acquire all the watches I want is somewhat limited. So when I say watch guru, I don't sadly have 500 watches behind a big walk-in cabinet. So I have to be very careful. But I'd say those are two brands that I think represent some of the best that's available without having to remortgage or sell organs off at the moment.
We can look, we can't touch, and we certainly can't buy it at the minute. But I'm just actually seeing on the big screen in front of me that both Seiko and IWC, their share price has just shot up after you made that announcement.
There you go. So, I feel like Elon Musk and his tweets on crypto or whatever. If only I'd known.
Good. Thank you for that. And it's always interesting to hear some not just the watch interest, but of course the job and job board and recruitment related stuff, of course. So Ryan, thank you very much. That's been brilliant. I hope that has made it explained a little bit more around programmatic and performance, the differences between the two. We've done our best, but that was really, really good. Really thankful for you to come on and go through all of that. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it wasn't too arduous, but yeah, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone and anyone who is listening, watching, and sticking with us. Please, as usual, comment, like, share, let us know what you like and what you don't like, and we will take that on board. So thank you very much, and until next time, goodbye.